I was just saying to Michelle, my LinkedIn picture needs updating. Me reading Curious George, two kids with their heads cut off, is not the most professional, so I'll have to change that. Well, thank you guys. We just have a few sessions left, so thanks for hanging in there. Maybe you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Why don't you go first, actually?
Okay, cool. My name is Bennett. I'm based up here in Boston. I'm a sales director at Vistar Media, which is a programmatic platform for digital out of home.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Michele Cardinal, and I lead BlackRock, basically brand and reputation, as well as our research and measurement team. So I'm excited to be here today. I'm excited all these people showed up through the rain.
So I figured we'd get started with a few hot seat questions, personal questions. So what would be your dream job other than your current role, of course?
Well, my current role, of course, but
Right.
Dream job, actually, it's funny, I met somebody earlier this, if money were not an issue or time, I would like to run my own coffee shop. So I could get coffee, just the perfect coffee whenever I want, and like chat with people.
Have you been to Render downstairs?
Not yet.
Okay, it's good. It's good. Second location, probably closer to your office.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Cool. All right, great. Go-to song at karaoke night.
This one, my opt-out is I'm a horrible singer, and so I'll be anyone's backup dancer in karaoke, but I don't do songs.
Okay, I'd probably pick a Queen song just because I have the same range as Freddie Mercury, probably. If you had to pick one meal, it could be breakfast, lunch, or dinner, but you had to eat it every day for the rest of your days, what would it be?
On this one, I would pick brunch because it usually involves like bacon and mimosas,
Okay.
and then anything else.
So just bacon and mimosas every morning. That sounds
It's gonna
amazing.
be a short life.
What would be your favorite thing, other than this weather, about living in Boston?
Funny enough, I would say the weather. I love the seasons here. I was in San Francisco for 20 years, and we had no seasons. It's like Groundhog Day. It's the same thing all the time. So it's exciting to have it be like hot and cold, but not today.
Not this, not now. Yeah, okay. Last question. Where are you going on your next trip? Work trip, personal vacation? Where are you headed?
I wish I had something super exciting, but we're going to Maine for spring break because I've never been to Maine.
Where?
It's only like an hour away. Kennebunk.
Nice. Beautiful place. Are you guys glamping, or are you going to do like the nice hotel?
Just Airbnb.
Okay, nice. Sounds great. Okay,
All right.
I think we're done.
Great.
Okay, so first real question. So just for background, can you tell us a little bit about BlackRock's overall marketing approach? And also, who is your target audience? Is it consumers? Is it B2B? Is it both? And then how do you tailor marketing and measurement to kind of speak to each of those groups individually?
Cool. So BlackRock is it's an asset manager. So we manage money for broad institutions, institutional clients. We also create funds, so ETFs, mutual funds, things that sort of and personal investors might invest in. A lot of those are sold through financial advisors. We also have, we're seeing sort of more and more personal investors are investing themselves, right, through sort of digital wealth apps, things like that. So, the sort of universe of like professional investors plus end investors are really important to us, and so sort of that comes to life in different ways through integrated campaigns, and because of the nature of investing, a lot of what we do is super targeted. But I think what's been interesting is I think over the last couple of years this has become more pronounced. But because we're a big global asset manager, like we operate in lots of different communities around the world that involve people that are not just our clients, right? So we help manage sort of pension funds for teachers in Texas. We manage infrastructure investments to build bridges in Europe, et cetera. So while a lot of people don't necessarily need to know who we are, there's a lot of people that care and just want to know that sort of some sense of what BlackRock does, and also they just want to know that we're a good company. And so we found that sort of there's almost this sort of societal lens of just a broad group of people that we also want to talk to and sort of explain a bit about kind of the things that we do in very simple ways, and then also sort of the positive impact that we can have on where we operate.
Cool. And then when you're thinking about these two very different audience segments, do you pick certain channels for certain audiences, or is it more similar message for one audience, and we're going to kind of hit them anywhere they go throughout their daily routine, either digitally or in the real world? Or do you specifically use social, for example, for more of the consumer approach, and you stick to maybe endemic publications for the B2B kind of high net worth individuals that you're looking to market to?
Yeah, I'd say it's kind of a combination. I think when we have broader goals about sort of just driving brand metrics, for example, we might be in sort of higher reach vehicles. We might be in TV. We might be in sort of broader digital channels. And then obviously, as you get more specific, so if you're talking to financial advisors or end investors, you might reach them through social or sort of more targeted, sometimes endemic. It's always good to have a presence there, but also sort of in other ways too. So it's really kind of a mix depending on what the goals are, but probably all of those things.
Cool. I don't have to be the first person to tell you that there's a lot going on today, right? Globally, conflict, political tension, domestically, economic recovery, stock market, interest rate changes. It's an election year. Can't believe it's already an election year again. General political divide. And then, of course, in media and marketing, I feel like it's already been mentioned a lot, but whether it is, alternative IDs for cookies and a cookieless future, or it's retail media, or, of course, AI. As a marketing leader, how do you stay attuned to changes in general consumer behavior? And what strategies do you employ to respond effectively to kind of the shifts that are happening probably on a weekly basis at this point?
That's a lot. Hearing all that change all at once is like exhausting. Right?
It's a lot, yeah.
Look, I think, we start with sort of at a foundational level. We start with really monitoring our brand and the perceptions of our brand globally. So we have brand studies that we do in sort of over a dozen markets across the world, where we look at sort of perceptions of BlackRock relative to our competitors and sort of our standing relative to competitors. It's really helpful to sort of watch that over time. What we also do is sort of look at sort of closer in or more immediate metrics around sort of social listening, not just around perceptions of our brand, but also just what are people saying in general about the markets, in culture, politically, and then sort of thinking sort of on an ongoing basis about sort of how that impacts us. I think what we see is it is a lot to synthesize. We do that even at BlackRock. We do that regularly for all of our funds too, right? So it is sort of endemic to BlackRock's culture to sort of always be surveying and valuing what's happening, and then making adjustments accordingly as needed to be sort of as relevant as possible, essentially. So it's a lot. Additionally, like beyond sort of our sort of core brand studies with our clients, as I mentioned before, we're also looking at just really broader consumer perceptions. I think the YouGov Consumer Index is a great resource, for example, because it has sort of weekly pulse on how consumers feel about different brands, and so it's a great sort of early indicator for certain things, and a great way to just keep the pulse on what's going on sort of with broader audiences, so that you're not sort of over focusing on just your clients.
Yeah, I definitely minimize the global part of that. Considering you're a global head of brand, every region, even every country has its own shit going on. And so how do you wrap your head around that? Is your team global? Do you have kind of global people that you're in contact with when you guys get on the phone at the same time and chat about maybe some of the things that are happening on the ground that maybe you want to just either be aware of or even avoid kind of entirely kind of speaking to it?
Yeah, that's a great question. We work very closely. So we have marketers in sort of, I would say, most of the countries in which we operate. So we have a hub in Europe, a hub in APAC. And what our team does in sort of a global brand goal is sort of we're responsible for sort of looking at these macro metrics and looking at trends across markets. And then we spend a lot of time actually with local marketers to look at sort of results that we see from a brand perspective or other sort of correlating metrics to understand, like, why do you think this number went up or down? What do you think is happening? How, sort of helping to diagnose anything that could be a problem, and also to identify, opportunities as well and things that we might want to sort of shift our focus onto. So it's really like an ongoing kind of close partnership with a lot of the local marketers that we have and local business partners too.
Cool. Yeah, and I think you kind of spoke to the shifts and how you kind of address it, but how do you, are there any examples recently where you've had to kind of take something pretty important that has to be addressed either directly or probably more often indirectly to at least show your support and kind of make sure that BlackRock is still being perceived in a positive light from a reputation standpoint?
Yeah, yeah. What's interesting is, the approach we try to take is sort of like, sort of never losing sight of like our long-term brand goals, for example. So if we're looking to grow the brand, if we have certain things that we're measuring, we try not to get too distracted by news and things that come up. But occasionally we will have fake news or we'll have a headline. But I think there's a couple of things that we do. And I think the first filter is really to like kind of diagnose the size of the problem, right? Like, is this really a problem, or are we just having a reaction because we saw our name in one headline? And we use our tools that I just mentioned to sort of really understand whether something is an issue or really worth even responding to or sort of taking action on. And then I think if we do decide we want to sort of shift our plans or do something to address either an issue or an opportunity, we still do that with the filter of like, staying sort of adhering to some of our brand goals and our broader marketing goals. So I think, what we found is like BlackRock, I think, can be, whether there's fake news or something, the heart of the issue is that sometimes people just don't understand what BlackRock does. Like, BlackRock's a little bit of a black box, right? So it's like, when people, when there's headlines, it's sort of easy to come after us because people don't always understand that. So a lot of what we're trying to do, especially with people who are outside of sort of our core professional investor audience, is just explain what we do to people and explain some of the positive impact that we have. And we found that sort of this actually does a lot to sort of alleviate, like, oh, right, okay, I get what you guys do. But you always do that in a way where it really builds the brand. It's not just responding to an issue. So I think we found that to be effective. There are a couple other, during my time at Vistar, I was at Vistar before BlackRock. We had similar issues where you might have a merchant security breach or something, and sort of you'd have headlines with like, millions of Visa cardholders are impacted by this breach. In that type of a scenario, you rarely, didn't necessarily need to address the breach, but you could have a campaign about security protections, right? And reminding people that they're sort of covered if something happens with their card. And so that was how we responded to some of those things. We saw sort of a longer term brand lift. So even if people hadn't heard of the breach, you're still having a positive impact from a brand perspective. So I think keeping that sort of longer term goal in mind is really important when you're deciding whether to react or how to respond. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Was your personal information stolen during the Visa?
Not that I know of.
Good. How do you perceive the intricate relationship between brand and reputation? What role do they play in kind of shaping consumer perceptions in today's market?
So I think it's so interesting because there's so much overlap and sort of connectivity between brand and reputation. I think the way that we sort of think about it is like brand is the thing that you're sort of proactively building, and you're trying to sort of carve out a position for yourself, for your brand in the market. Reputation is more sort of this like general sentiment and like the sum of your actions and sort of people's perception of your brand. I think it's really interesting when you put it in terms of like in human terms. So you might say, Bennett, that Bennett guy has a great reputation because
Let's
people
hope so.
heard of you, they've like heard about actions that you've taken, right, and talked to people that you've interacted with. But then that sort of the other angle might be someone might say, oh, you're trying to build your brand, right, your professional brand to be seen in a certain way. And when you do that, you might, dress a certain way, you might do certain things to sort of convey this brand for yourself that you're trying to build. So I think what we find when we look at for different companies, it's like there's this really great relationship between both brand and reputation where they can be out of sync a little bit, but that can't last for too long. So if you have a really strong brand with sort of ongoing reputational issues, eventually that could drag down your brand. I think that was an issue for Abercrombie a couple of years ago. TV what happens with Boeing is another like sort of live one that we're all watching. But there are also some brands that are really sticky, and so I think Amazon is a great example of like they ran into sort of some reputational issues a couple of years ago where there were questions about how they were sort of treating some of their workers. But I think just because of the stickiness of the brand, I personally would have to they'd have to do some really terrible things for me to like, get, find an alternative to Amazon. So I think it's interesting to see how sort of a strong brand can help you recover from reputational issues, but likewise, sort of reputational harm can really drag down the brand. So.
Yeah, I was recently looking at a kind of a reputation ranking score, and Meta, TikTok, ExxonMobil, Bitcoin, very, very low reputation scores, but the amount of time and money that we're spending with these companies, it's either we can't live without them, literally, this is where we get our gas, or this is where we get, our diapers, or it's just, have they done something terrible enough that I'm going to delete the app or drive 5 minutes out of my way to go to a different gas station or something like that. So the lack of a correlation between some of these brands that continue to just pump tons of dollars, for their shareholders, but everybody kind of hates them. So it's just kind of an interesting kind of
right?
juxtaposition, yeah.
And you do see there eventually is some tipping point, probably in one direction or another. Either they manage to address the reputational issues such that their brand recovers, or it goes the other direction. So yeah.
Media consumption is changing, right? It's always changing. Platforms, screens, or even how much or little we're paying attention to said media, right? Can you speak to the way BlackRock, or maybe the finance category in general, is shifting its own kind of channel investment strategy when it comes to different mediums to kind of keep up with, the way we're, interacting with media differently?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of what we look at are sort of broad consumer trends, but then also because we have such specific target audiences, we look at them sort of individually as well. But I think in general, obviously we're experimenting with lots of different things and sort of testing different channels. More and more we are looking to sort of do just be as targeted as we possibly can, obviously to be efficient. But another thing that sort of our previous conversation that's also important is agility and the ability to sort of get in and out and change creative really as quickly as possible when we need to has become sort of front and center for us. So if it takes 2 weeks to traffic a banner ad, like that's kind of a non-starter sometimes. And I think in terms of attention, actually, with sort of more and more clutter in digital, we're finding that old school TV, tried and true.
Out of home.
And of course out of home that you cannot avoid.
Of course.
These are areas where you have people's attention, there's not a lot of clutter. And so, those are sort of everything old is new again, right? So I think looking at sort of new ways to target through television, et cetera, are things that we're looking at, but it's just interesting to see the cycle, right?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, you technically weren't even here this morning, but you speak to a topic that has been brought up several times today, which is brands like New Balance and Papa John's are reinvesting in upper funnel channels, right, strategy, whereas Ocean Spray, I think they said that linear TV just wasn't working for them, so they kind of eliminated it altogether. So it's kind of interesting that you're also saying that, we shouldn't kind of focus too much on the bottom and the direct response stuff, and maybe actually, continue to build a brand and tell a really good story so that it reaches people in an easy way.
I have to credit LinkedIn. Their sort of business-to-business group did a really interesting study recently where they shared that, particularly with a lot of financial brands, they do very targeted marketing through LinkedIn, through other channels, and they're just all talking to their same customers and each other's customers over and over. And so it's like this very sort of tight group, and sort of their findings or their recommendations were you essentially all the people that are competitors with each other are just talking to the same small group of people over and over. And so they did find that sort of, yes, these broader channels, you want to bring new people into your brand, going to some of these higher reach vehicles in order to achieve that. One, gets you out of the clutter of a lot of competitors, but also is a great way to just bring new people in. So yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. BlackRock, like any kind of public financial investment company, there's a balance between short-term returns, right, with strategic long-term financial gain, right? This plays out every quarter, right, through a quarterly earnings statement, calls, announcements, analyst questions, stuff like that. Can you apply this short and long-term dilemma to marketing and measurement, right? So how would your team balance kind of the short-term reactive stuff with longer-term strategic planning that's being planned maybe annually or even maybe longer than that?
Yeah, I think this comes back to goals, right? Because a lot of times, sort of from a marketing perspective, particularly for more considered purchases. No one just like clicks on a banner ad and buys an ETF. Like, that's just not how it works. And so you can look at short-term results, but so much of the work that we do, even when it's really targeted at a lower funnel, still it's like there's a long tail and it takes a while to make an impact. And so the way that we address that sort of within the marketing organization and sort of our executives and partners as well, is we set sort of long-term goals that we measure through brand tracking studies and sort of different overall customer acquisition, things like that. But then we map those goals to near-term metrics. So you can look at like whether engagement has a correlation with consideration and whether an ad campaign that you're measuring, if that is driving sort of for people who've seen the campaign, if that drives certain brand metrics, you would hope that over time you're ultimately lifting sort of the broader metrics in your brand tracker. And so we have to sort of tell that story about how what we're doing today and the measurements and sort of the results that we see this quarter are having that long-term impact over time. But it's a bit of laddering to help people, sort of internally and also for ourselves, make sure that we're optimizing the right way.
Makes sense. This is kind of a curveball question. Is there anything that you are doing that you're not happy about from a marketing or measurement or reputation standpoint? Or is there anything that you would love to do? Maybe you did it in a previous role and you'd love to do it here that you're hopefully going to get the chance to kind of implement in the next 6 to 12 months?
That's fun. I mean, there's nothing like I'm unhappy about necessarily. I think that longer term and things that I think I wish that we could do. I think financial services industry tends to be a little more conservative, and so I think though from history, it's like the things that are riskier or more breakthrough are the ones where you sort of have to take a chance a little bit, but those tend to be the things that break through and get attention. And so, I think any financial company sort of probably struggles with the right balance of like, what's the right amount of risk and things that you do that are different versus sort of impact and like the ROI that you get out of those things. So, without having any specific thing on my wish list, I think continuing to sort of push the boundaries in a space that feels somewhat, less risky is always sort of a balance I think that we're trying to strike.
Makes sense. How do you foster a culture of adaptability, right? You're a leader, you have a team. How do you kind of prepare and empower your team to respond with flexibility as things are changing and as the markets are changing?
I think a lot of it is like sort of fostering a culture of like curiosity and open-mindedness. So curiosity is like exploring what's out there. You don't just like turn on a campaign and sort of let it run, right? So how's it performing? What new information is coming in? And what can we do to take advantage of that that would make something more effective? And I say open-mindedness because I think sometimes you'll have marketers like you put your heart and soul into a campaign and it's going, and then something new comes along. Really, like now I have to rethink this. So I think, but being open to sort of taking in new information and making adjustments, sort of all for the greater good of having a better impact is sort of how I sort of remind my team and also how we try to adjust. And I think again a lot of that is actually quite sort of welcome within the culture of BlackRock because the markets are changing on a daily basis, and so in a good way, there's sort of a nice cultural expectation that like you're always going to do the right thing, and even if it means sort of rethinking something. So.
Yeah. Do you guys have like a pocket of money, whether it's a test budget or something along the lines of where if things get weird and different, you can react to it. You have extra money instead of canceling a campaign and kind of diverting money elsewhere. Do you guys have like at least some space where you can play safely if you have to make it kind of a quick change?
I wish it were like a pocket. I wish there was like a money tree. There's not a money tree that we tap into, but we always carve out. Like we plan for agility, so we plan for stuff to change. So there's certain things that we can adjust fairly easily because we build our campaigns to be flexible. But yes, in the event that something major happens, we're also open to sort of rethinking things. But we try to plan for stuff that we know, plan for what we don't know that will eventually come in. So a little bit more.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Yes.
So on that same front, are you guys doing anything with like automatically generating your content or multivariate kind of things? And how does your compliance process work with that?
Compliance, the compliance question. So within a framework, there are certain things that we can do. So we're starting to test more of those sort of automatically generated messaging. For us, that still has to go through a compliance filter, so nothing is like as automated as we would like. But all the steps sort of before it gets to compliance and before it gets to sort of that human check, we are doing sort of different things to get better at that and more efficient at that. So whether that's through sort of testing new ways to build content or automatically sort of optimizing based on creative that's in market. So we can adjust what's in market. We can just sort of earlier in the process. It's just if you find a way to like automate a sort of an AI compliance partner, that'd be great. But we're not there yet.
You talked a little bit about the long tail, but in terms of results or KPIs that you're looking at, what are the things that are kind of most important to you at this point?
So for me, in my role, sort of brand and reputation. So I'm more focused on sort of looking after that the long-term view of what we're seeing sort of in terms of trends around our brand health. And some of that is driven by marketing, obviously, but some of it are things that are sort of driven by things outside of marketing. So it could be certain things or actions that we take as a company. It could be our products. It could be sales teams and sort of their engagement with clients. And so while a good portion of my job is marketing specific, I actually also spend a lot of time sort of sharing sort of what we know about our brands with partners across the firm to say, oh, like this is what's happening to our Net Promoter Score. How might we, think about that from a sales perspective, or partnering with sales teams to, diagnose sort of what are our biggest drivers of Net Promoter Score? Where are we soft? Where are we strong? So how do we evolve that? So even though I think this context, brand can be marketing specific, it's a lot of sort of evangelizing, sort of all the things that help drive brand across the firm. But I think from a marketing perspective, we do have sort of lower funnel and near-term metrics that we look at, but that really varies by audience too. So
Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
How you doing? 2 questions about Chase. I assume this wasn't fake news. Yesterday it was reported that Chase is going to be able to sell purchasing data to advertisers.
I saw that, yeah. Did you?
Sorry, I did not. Had a big day
So-
yesterday.
Okay, so a bank is going to be able to sell what you buy to advertisers. I'd love your thoughts on that. And second, how does Jamie Dimon do it? Why is he the golden child?
Let's get Jamie on the stage now. So selling their purchase data to advertisers.
Yeah, so they're starting to segment
I
and
thought it was
monetize
fake
their
news.
audiences, which is, it does sound crazy. But Cardlytics does something kind of at scale across a lot of banking, clients. But Chase is kind of the first to it sounds like they're going to kind of break off and do their own thing and, provide that data directly to marketers.
Interesting. I mean, from a BlackRock perspective, I don't know how that would sort of immediately impact us. We don't have. It's interesting because we essentially everything we do goes through. Either it could go through a financial advisor or sort of a direct platform. So we don't, other than sort of our close and sort of institutional clients and some advisors, like we don't have a lot of data about our end investor. So for BlackRock, I'm not sure there are implications. And yeah, I don't know the specifics of Chase or how they're going to do that, but I'm not surprised. I think even in my time at Visa, there was a lot of discussions about sort of how they could sort of, how credit card companies sit on so much data. How can they monetize it and share it in a way, obviously, that's not going to be, harmful from a consumer perspective.
Yeah, I think because Chase is a retail bank, they just have a lot of audiences, a lot of consumer data, whereas BlackRock, I think the majority of your investors are working through advisors, probably don't want to be targeted by any ads, let alone data coming directly from BlackRock is probably my assumption. Any other questions? No? Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.